Marcos Vinicius Rodriguez Martins from the Federal University of the State of Rio de Janeiro. And Celia would be with you, but she's not here. Yes, and Celia Belmiro from Federal University of Minas in Brazil. Marcos will present us their study about the collaborative authorship of adults and children in two non-fiction books about nature. I think one of them has been published on the occasion of celebration of Environmental Day in 2015, if I'm right. A study which indicates that children and adults have varying perspectives on reality and fiction, different perspectives that affect their individual approaches in building this intergenerational collaboration. So the floor is yours.
Thanks, Jess. I'm glad to be here. Thanks to the organization, thanks to your colleagues. So non-fiction books hold a place. Wait a minute. Oops, sorry. Okay. Non-fiction books hold a place within the sphere of children's literature, yet their distinct nature remains a topic of ongoing deliberation within the academic critique domain. This is primarily because of the prominent feature, language hybridization, which blends elements of literature, art, and information. This text scrutinizes the collaborative engagement of adults and children in the composition of non-fiction books, giving due regard to four pivotal facets: intergenerational collaboration, the notion of information sharing, collaborative authorships, and the fusion of literary language with the informative dimension. We explore theoretical perspective that advocate for fresh approaches to works designed for children, envisioning non-fiction books as integral components within an intricate network that transcends traditional dichotomies. This network does not rigidly separate fiction and fiction, literature and information, art and science, or nature and culture. In this regard, we develop an understanding of expansive facets in which fiction, non-fiction, information, literature, science, and art intertwine, forming a blend. Thus, we propose greater fluidity in the classification of non-fiction and fiction, not settling opposition, but expanding information with a variation of fictionality. We corroborate with Bernard Ascension that fiction does not replicate reality, but rather represent it, essentially represent it, thus reconstruction and reinvented. When a theme is depicted, it undergoes a process of reinvention, giving rise to a new reality, as articulated by Bernardo, the reality of reality. Consequently, the question surrounding the demarcation between non-fiction and fiction becomes intricate and multifaceted. How do we discern what's genuine or fictions within the context of a children's book? Or how can we distinguish the artist's process from the scientific process in a book elucidate the phenomenon of a volcano? Or how to separate elements of fictional content from affirmative text? Nicole Robin asked whether non-fiction books differ from fiction in their presentation. Children are never mistaken. Critics are first to say as exciting as a novel, as if only novels could be exciting or were the criterion for passion. Prompting us to reflect of the structural aspect of the universe of children's literature. Okay. Examine how adults select what is exciting or not for children. This dichotomy only pertains to adults responsible for book selection. What function do children undertake in the right process? How do we differentiate fiction and fact within the cognitive process of both children and adults? This inquiry propels us into a more intricate domain, the intergenerational dynamic between adults and children in the authorship of the children's literature. So, how can a connection be established between otherness and information, considering children as both producers and consumers of information? According to Silva and Gomez, understanding information from the otherness perspective requires recognizing the difference among individuals, and the interaction between the self and the other can contribute to the construction of information. In the other perspective, two fundamental differences come into play. The first is a mutual unfamiliarity that separates the author and the user. And the second is the difference that brings the author and the user close together in the pursuit of composition of a new identity. In this context, it is not just a transfer of information between the adult self and the child other, or vice versa, but information as a shared experience on a direct path toward the collective construction of knowledge. The interaction between individuals in this context is devoid of a linear nature. As Silva and Gomes suggests, information as otherness inherently defines the linearity of the construction process. The sent author and the received reader represent ontological entities, which with potentially distinct needs and perspectives. Initially, both are independent subjects with a unique perception. The sharing of information established through opportunities for interaction, there are more concretely envisioning, aiming to bridge these differences, examining the possibility of interpretation of difference in the other. The authors emphasize that it is essential to consider that only in a horizontal relationship between author and reader can difference become evident. This discussion leads us to key points. First, the need to understand the alterity dimension that acknowledges a difference in direction between the adult subject and the child subject, recognizing both potential producers and consumers of information. Secondly, the substitution of the term transfer with information sharing is significant, as it underscores a horizontal relationship between the reader and the author in the development of informational, cultural, literary, and artistic repertoire. In both cases, we can contemplate the construction of the relationship between adults and children for the perspective that Guba King's kinship model. According to the researcher, it holds that children and adults are separate by differences of degree, not of kind, meaning that we should exclude difference model discourse that depicts children as a separate species in favor of emphasizing that growth is a messy and unpredictable continuum. Therefore, the information about the world that children share must also be considered in the process of constructing a nonfiction book, whether in its production, development, or reception. These elements are crucial for comprehending a nonfiction book under construction, as we contemplate the concept of collaborative authorship within the context of information sharing. This approach recognizes children as individuals who engage with the world based on the unique potential, cultural backgrounds, and the capacity for agencies. Intergeneration nonfiction books have the potential to offer dual perspective, the nature of textual structure and the need for new insights into child readers' writing. The boundary between reality and fantasy blurs as we question the limits imposed between fiction and fiction. We can then ask, what is the difference between a fictional text for child and adult? Thus, we can start from the premise of Alan Arnold, who states that all fiction is someone's truth, although it may be a mental truth, and all nonfiction is someone's interpretation of what has happened or is happening in the world. In this sense, circumscribing fiction and nonfiction into predefined categories constitutes an eternal quest for the end of the Ouroboros tale. Therefore, nonfiction works engage in sharing knowledge of the world with the children, not subjugating them or forming onto epistemic orientations that reject their experiences and perceptions. Thus, the discussion proposed here consider nonfiction book as an object within a network of knowledge that employs intricate language and text structures. Collaborative writing between adults and children has been addressed by many researchers, including Smith, Guber, and Bernstein. These authors seek to understand the intergenerational collaboration network between adults and children in authorial praxis. According to Smith, collaboration is a material praxis and a theoretically situated relationship well suited to discretion the tension between the real and imagined children. This largely occurs due to the recognition and interaction in the practice of the multiple authorship. In intergenerational collaborative partnerships, adults recognize that children are childhood experts, considering their worldviews and life experiences. Collaborative authorship strives to empower children to take an authoritative roles within the realm of children's literature and culture, roles traditionally held by adults. In essence, collaborative authorship represents a method a method of creating texts that both preserve textual adaptability and cohesion while fostering the establishment of dialogical relationship characterized by distinct perspectives. These elements are crucial for understanding collaborative authorship, especially in nonfiction books. Hence, it's fitting to introduce two editorial projects that prioritize information dissemination centering on the children as active contributor and use their potential, culture, and agency. In the project Livro Vermelho das Crianças, the Red Book of Children, coordinated by Otávio Maentino Freitas, 50 endangered Brazilian wildlife species are featured, presenting their biological curiosities without placing undue emphasis on their threatened status. Instead, it aims to illustrate the harmonious relationship between these species and the natural environment. On each page, a combination of informative and literary language is evident, accompanied by illustration created by the children who participated in the Children and Youth Endangered Animals Drawing Contest. This integration, there is a reproduction of an illustration produced by Francis Darwin, the son of Charles Darwin, featured on the reverse side of one of the original manuscript pages on the origin of a species, held in the Cambridge University Library. Paratextual elements, including indexes, glossaries, and tables of context, among others, are characterized by Kepler and access resources. Scholars of nonfiction books recognize the elements as vital tools for reader for the thematic understanding of the work. In this regard, the presence of illustration and informative text combined with the literary language in the book indicates the initial signs of a dialogical and collaborative relationship between adults and children. Notably, on the page featuring the cara dourada, gold-faced tamarin, there is a verbal text that introduces the bird. In the Amparo Swamp in the Minas Gerais, near the banks of the San Francisco River, a couple of little birds dance among the branches of the Brazilian pepper tree. The verbal text then continues to narrate a fictional story about the bird, incorporating various informative and or scientific elements about the species, such as, once they decide on the location, the cara dourado golden-faced tamarin couple begins building the nest in the shape of a globe. At the bottom of the page, there is a brief caption about the bird situation. Endemic to Brazil, this small population isolated from one another as a result of deforestation, wildfires, and the convention of the land into pasture can be found in the habitat, gallery, forest, and arid woodlands. On the left-hand page, a child illustration on this bird captures our attention with its amalgamation of artistic techniques. Various artistic elements have been collaged together, including crayon rendered depiction of the bird, scattered sheets of the musical notes, and a substantial branch upon which the bird is perched. The child illustrator, perhaps in collaboration with the adult, creates an image that enriches the nuances of the written text, infusing meaning into several aesthetic components. Notably, the linkage between the human experience and the bird, symbolized by musical notes, become evident. The same construction appears in two other instances. In the visual description of the Aranha Chicote, do Recipe, and the Soldadinho de Aripe, a ripe mannequin. In both representations, we observe the collage technique using the children's illustration as a base. The book Como se forma a lava dos vulcões, or How lava is formed in the volcanoes, produced through intergenerational collaboration between the child, David Martins Rodrigues, and 4 adults, including his grandmother, superimpose the child's drawing onto the scene found on the first page. The accompanying written text reads, "Is the earth crying? It's flowing." The image illustrates a volcano with its lava, and the text continues with a flowing down the mountain. The illustration also employs collage technique to compose each of the visual elements: the volcano, trees, house, clouds. Everything is assembled in a digitally illustrated setting. According to Drucker, the playful oscillation between different levels of pictorial representation draw attention to the image and the medium at hand, and to the scenes on boundary between different materials and contexts. We can expand upon Drucker's insight by noting that collage technique facilitated the transcending of our aesthetic constraint about the visual representation, whether crafted by children and adults. At the same time, they harmonized the distinct viewpoints of both children and adults, despite recognizing the adult possesses a command of graphic design composition technique. Traces of the child's perspective remains evident in the visual arrangements of both books. In the textual dimension, the book imparts knowledge about volcanoes by initiating discussion with the question raised by children, and subsequently addressed by adult experts. Furthermore, within the written component, literary language is incorporated, seeking to alleviate the inherent objective of scientific terminology. For instance, in a particular passage, the text expresses the earth popping, rolling, nervous, sneezing, exploding. Through the use of personification, the earth is anthropomorphized, transforming it into a character within the book. This portrait highlights the Earth's volatile disposition attributed to the existence of volcanoes and on its surface. A noteworthy aspect is the illustrator and author David assumes a role as one of the characters in the book, and his likeness is featured within its page. In a particular scene, we witness a child and an adult contemplating the process of lava, with both remarking, "And how does it happen?" Let's follow the biologist Robert, a biologist who plays the violin, on this adventure. The term biologist, a neologist coined and depicted by Dave, represents a fictional character seemingly rooted in reality. A biologist with a musical talent who serves as a narrator and formative of scientific process. The inclusion of the violist with a plays violin, who assumes the role of an authoritative narrator explaining scientific process, introduces a convergence of David's imaginative world and the scientific procedure recounted through the character. The illustration by the boy presents a robot equipped with an excavator capable of digging vast distances. thereby subtly blurring the boundary between fiction and reality within the non-fiction text. In this context, it raises the question of the imagination concerning scientific process holds significance in the context of facilitating information dissemination. This is a biologist. A biologist who plays violin. Maria Mitchell, a prominent astronomer, library, and naturalist, asserted the vital role of the imagination in science, stating, in science, we particularly require imagination. It's not only mathematical or pure logical, rather, it encompasses elements of beauty and poetry. Hence, the written context is integrated within the context of the scientific informational text, but is infused with the imaginative world of the boy through the interplay of the visual and verbal artistic elements. Consequently, a dialogical relationship emerges between the child fantastical perspective of the world and the more objective scientific textual framework within the realm of the adult's reality. These two perspectives are not in direct overlap, but exist as varying degrees of alterity in terms of how they verbally and visually represent the world. Hence, the examination of these two books elucidate the two facets of the interplay. First, the children illustration exhibit a complementary rapport with the textual content, whether it's literary or not. Second, it becomes evident that it is feasible to formulate a reading proposition wherein text and images coalesces into an informative whole, fostering a hybridization of language. This fusion involves overlapping elements that present readers with diverse avenues for interpretation. On the other hand, collaborative authorship in nonfiction books often depends on the relationship between the author, children and adults, and the level of engagement of each participant. Creative freedom is not only expressed through individuals' skill, but also respect for differences, demonstrating that collaboration among non-peers individuals is what provides the balance that sustains any project.
Thank you.